I walked through the front door of my own house and felt immediately that something was wrong. Not wrong in the loud way, not wrong the way a broken window or a raised voice signals danger. Wrong in the quiet way. The kind of wrong that lives in a room that is too still, too dark, too empty of the sounds that should be there. My wife was sitting on the couch with no lights on, no television, no phone, no book. Just sitting there in the dark at 6:30 in the evening, perfectly still, the way a person sits when they are somewhere else entirely in their mind. I almost said something kind. I almost walked over and put my hand on her shoulder and asked if she was okay. But my son Marcus appeared from the hallway before I could move, and the look on his face stopped me. It was not the face of a teenage boy who had just wandered out to say hello to his dad. It was the face of someone who had been waiting. Someone who had been watching the front door. And when Marcus said quietly and quickly that his mother was fine, she was just tired, I realized in that moment that he was not reassuring me. He was managing me. Before I tell you what I found that night, I want to ask you something, and I mean this sincerely. If you came home and felt something wrong before you could even name it, the kind of wrong that lives in your gut before it reaches your brain, would you ask questions right away? Or would you do what I almost did and let it go? Drop your answer in the comments. Because the choice I made in that moment changed everything that came after it. My name is Jack. I am 41 years old. I have been a project manager for a mid-sized commercial construction firm for 14 years. I am not a dramatic person. I do not look for problems and I do not invent them. I am the kind of man who checks the weather before he leaves the house, who reads the full contract before he signs, who shows up 10 minutes early because he respects other people's time. I say this not to make myself sound impressive, but to explain why what I am about to tell you took me as long as it did to see clearly. Careful people can still be blind. Patient people can still be used. Quiet people can still be in the middle of something they do not yet have language for. My wife's name is Diane. We met 17 years ago at a work event. She was working in marketing at the time, confident and sharp, the kind of woman who makes everyone in the room feel like the conversation is worth having. I fell for her quickly. We dated for 2 years, got engaged and married when I was 26 and she was 24. In the early years it was good, real good. We built a life that made sense. We bought a modest house. We had Marcus. We paid down debt. We made plans. I trusted her the way you trust the ground under your feet. Marcus is 15 now. He was quiet as a young child and became quieter as he grew. Not sullen, not troubled, just internal. He thinks before he speaks. He notices things. He is more like me in that way than Diane, and I have always found that both a comfort and a small sadness, because I know what it costs to be the kind of person who sees everything and says little. I need you to understand the shape of our life before that evening, because the shape matters. We were not a broken family. We were not a screaming household. To anyone looking from the outside, we were steady. Diane had gone back to part-time consulting work once Marcus started middle school. I was earning well, not extravagantly, but enough. We took one vacation a year. We went to Marcus's school events. We had dinner most nights. We argued sometimes, the way all couples do, but nothing that felt dangerous or permanent. Looking back now, I can see the distance that had grown between Diane and me. Not a sudden distance, not a dramatic one, the slow kind. The kind that builds the way sediment builds at the bottom of a river. You do not notice the river floor rising until one day the water is shallow. I noticed it. I told myself it was normal. I told myself we were busy. I told myself we were fine. The evening I came home early started like an ordinary day. I had a site meeting get canceled at 4 in the afternoon, which almost never happens. My normal drive home put me at the front door around 6:30, but on this particular Thursday I was walking through the door at 5:15. I had not called ahead. It did not occur to me to call ahead. It was my house. I had been in meetings all day and I was tired and I was looking forward to sitting down. The moment I pushed open the front door, I felt it. The house was dark except for the thin light coming through the side windows from the street. Not dim the way a house is dim when someone has just not turned a light on yet. Dark in a deliberate way, like the darkness was a choice. And Diane was sitting on the couch, completely still, her hands in her lap, looking at nothing. Marcus came out from the hallway almost immediately, and something in the way he moved told me he had heard my key in the lock and come quickly, too quickly. He said his mom was just tired. He said she had a headache. He said she had been resting. He said it all in a rush, in that careful way, and then he looked at me and I could see that he was asking me something with his eyes that he could not ask out loud. I looked at Diane. She had turned her head toward me by then. She gave me a smile that did not reach anything above her cheekbones. She said she was fine. She said she just needed a few minutes. She got up from the couch and went to the kitchen, and I heard the sound of water running and cabinet doors and then the normal sounds of someone starting dinner. I stood in the living room for a moment. Marcus had disappeared back down the hallway. The house felt returned to normal, the way a sheet of water goes smooth again after you drop something into it. But I had seen the ripple. I had felt the weight of what had been dropped before the surface closed over it. I did not say anything that night. I sat down at the dinner table and we ate and we talked about Marcus's school project, and Diane asked me how the meeting had gone and I said it had been canceled, and she said that was a nice surprise to be home early. And I said yes. And I watched her. And she was fine. She was exactly fine in the careful, managed way that had never before felt like something to notice. That night after Diane had gone to bed and I had checked that Marcus was in his room with the door closed, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and I tried to name what I was feeling. Not what I suspected, not what I feared, just what I felt. And what I felt was the specific, cold feeling of a man who has just realized that the people closest to him have been rehearsing something he was not invited to. I want to be honest here, I did not snoop that night. I did not go through Diane's phone. I did not check her email or search her location or do any of the things that a suspicious husband in a movie does in the first act. I went to bed. I lay in the dark next to my wife and I listened to her breathe and I thought about the look on my son's face, not Diane's face, Marcus's face, because it was Marcus's expression that I kept coming back to. The look of a boy who had been given a job he should not have been given. The next 2 weeks passed in what I can only describe as a strange clarity. I was not looking for something specific. I was not building a case. I was simply paying attention in a way that I understood now, stopped doing at some point without noticing. I watched the rhythms of the house. I watched the timing of phone calls. I watched the way Diane reacted to notifications. I watched Marcus, not with suspicion toward my son, with concern. Because Marcus was 15 and he was carrying something. And whatever it was visible in the way he looked at his mother and the way he looked away from me. About 10 days after the dark living room evening, I came home at my normal time and found the house empty. Marcus was at a school thing. Diane had left a note on the counter that said she had run out to get groceries and would be back by 7. Normal, completely normal. I set my bag down and went to the counter to read the note again and I saw next to the note Diane's phone. She had left her phone on the counter. I want to stop here and tell you clearly what I did and what I did not do. I did not pick up the phone and scroll through it looking for something to confirm what I feared. The phone was lying screen up on the counter, and a message had come in while I was reading the note, and the screen was lit up, and I could see the preview from where I was standing without touching anything. The message preview was from a contact name I did not recognize. It was 3 words. It said, "Did you tell him?" I stood there and I read those 4 words and I felt the floor of my life do something I cannot fully describe. Not collapse, not drop. More like a slow and terrible settling, the way a building settles into ground that turns out to be softer than anyone knew when they poured the foundation. Did you tell him? Not did you tell Jack, not did you talk to your husband, did you tell him? As if the person sending the message already understood that the him they meant was someone Diane had been deciding how and whether to inform of something. As if telling him was a task, a thing that had to be managed and timed and prepared for. I did not touch the phone. I walked to the kitchen sink and I filled a glass with water and I drank it slowly and I thought. By the time Diane came home 45 minutes later, I was sitting at the kitchen table reading a report from work. And when she came in with the grocery bags, I stood up and helped her put things away and I said hello and I asked about her afternoon and she said it was good. She had stopped to see her friend Paula. Traffic had been annoying and how was my day? My day, I said, had been fine. I'm going to tell you now about a conversation I had with Marcus 3 days later, and I want you to understand how carefully I had to approach it. Marcus is my son and I love him completely and without condition. He was not responsible for whatever was happening in our house, but he was inside it. And the look on his face that first evening had told me that he had been given knowledge that a 15-year-old boy should not have to carry alone. I took Marcus to get food on a Saturday morning, just the 2 of us, the way we used to do when he was smaller. Pancakes at a diner 2 towns over that he had always liked. We sat across from each other in the booth and we talked about his classes and his friends and the video game he was playing. And when the food arrived and we had been sitting together long enough for things to feel easy, I looked at him over my coffee cup and I said, as simply and calmly as I could manage, that I wanted him to know that whatever was going on in our house, it was not his job to protect me from it or to handle it. I told him that I was his father and that my job was to be the one who carried hard things, not his. I told him that he did not have to tell me anything he did not want to tell me. But I wanted him to know that I already knew something was wrong and that I was not going to fall apart. Marcus looked at his pancakes for a long time. Then he looked up at me and he said very quietly that Mom had been talking to someone, that she had been talking to this person for a while, that Marcus had found out by accident about 4 months ago when he had borrowed her phone to make a call because his battery was dead and he had seen messages that he was not looking for and had not been prepared to see. He said he had not told me because his mother had sat him down the next day and told him that she and I were going through a difficult time, that the conversations he had seen were with a friend, that things were complicated and she needed him to give her some space to figure things out before she talked to me. She had made him feel that telling me would break something that might still be fixable. I want to tell you that I kept my face calm. I want to tell you that I held myself together for my son, and I did. My hands were flat on the table, my voice was even. I told Marcus that he had done nothing wrong. I told him that he should not have had to hold this. I told him that I was proud of him for telling me and that it took real courage to say it out loud. I paid for breakfast. We drove home. I did not say another word about it in the car. But inside, I was doing a kind of math that felt like it was rearranging every calculation I had ever made about my life. 4 months, Marcus had known something for 4 months, which meant the something itself was older than that. Which meant the distance I had been telling myself was normal, the quietness, the managed evenings, the smile that did not reach her eyes had a source, had a name, had a contact in Diane's phone that she had left on the kitchen counter on a Tuesday night. I need to tell you about the weeks that followed because they matter in ways you might not expect. I did not confront Diane that weekend. I did not come home and lay everything on the table. I did not make accusations based on a 3-word text message preview and a second-hand account from a scared 15-year-old boy. Because I am not a man who moves on incomplete information. And because some part of me, the part that had been married to this woman for 15 years, needed to be sure. Needed to have the full picture before I did anything that could not be undone. What I did instead was take stock, not of her, of myself. I looked at our finances. I looked at our accounts, what we had saved, what the house was worth, what I had put into our shared account every month for 14 years, and what I had in my own name. I called a lawyer not to start a process but to understand one. I made an appointment under a professional pretext, and I asked the questions I needed to ask in language that was general and hypothetical and got answers that were specific and real. I was not building a case against Diane. I was making sure that whatever happened next, I would not be standing with nothing in my hands because I had not thought ahead. I also had a hard conversation with myself during those weeks, about what I wanted, about what I was actually afraid of, about the difference between what I could survive and what I was willing to pretend had not happened. I had spent 15 years making Diane's comfort a priority. I had moved when she wanted to move. I had taken on extra projects at work when her consulting was slow. I had given up a job opportunity in another city because the timing did not work for her career, and she had asked me not to go and I had stayed. I had been the steady one. The dependable one, the one who did not ask for too much because asking felt like creating a problem that would then need to be managed. And I understood sitting with myself in those weeks that this was the thing I had to stop. Not because Diane had been wrong to need someone steady, but because steady had somewhere along the way stopped meaning trustworthy and started meaning invisible. Steady had become something people pointed to when they needed to explain why they did not have to try harder. He is fine. He handles it. He does not need much. I also want to tell you about a phone call I received during this period from Diane's mother, Carol. Carol and I had always gotten along. She was a practical woman, not especially warm but not unkind, and she had never been the type to interfere in our marriage. But she called me on a Wednesday morning when she must have known I would be between meetings, and after a few minutes of normal conversation she said carefully that she was worried about Diane, that Diane was going through something. That Carol hoped I would be patient with her. I said I appreciated her saying so. Carol said she knew this was not easy. I said I was sure she was right. And when I hung up the phone, I understood that the circle of people who knew something I was still only feeling was wider than I had thought. I want to tell you about the Sunday evening 3 weeks after the dark living room. Because that is the night things moved from the quiet preparation phase into something else entirely. Diane was out. She had said she was having dinner with Paula, which was the same friend she had mentioned stopping to see on the night I had read the text message preview. I had said that sounded nice. I had meant it to sound ordinary. Marcus was at a friend's house for the night. The house was mine. I want to be clear again about what I did. I sat down with the marriage and I thought about the text message and I thought about what Marcus had told me in the diner and I thought about Carol's phone call and I thought about 4 months of managed evenings and careful smiles. And I made a decision, not to violate my wife's privacy for sport or revenge, but to know the truth of my own life. Because a man has a right to know the truth of his own life. And I had earned, through 15 years of loyalty and effort, and staying quiet when staying quiet felt like enough, the right to stop pretending I did not feel what I felt. I found the phone in Diane's bedside drawer, which is where she kept it at night after she started putting it face down before she fell asleep, which had started about 5 months ago and which I had noticed at the time and filed away as nothing. What I found on the phone I am not going to describe completely, because some of it is not the kind of thing that belongs in a public story, but I will tell you the shape of it. The messages were from a man named Daniel. They went back 9 months. They began as what might look like friendship carefully with language that stayed close enough to ordinary that it could be explained away as nothing if you only read a few at a time. But reading them all from the beginning, the shape was clear and unmistakable. The tone shifted around month 3, the language shifted, the frequency shifted, the content shifted. By month 6, there was nothing about these messages that could be described as friendship. I put the phone back exactly as I had found it. I went downstairs. I sat in the kitchen in the dark for a long time, not because I was imitating what I had seen Diane do the evening this all began, but because sitting in the dark was suddenly the only thing that matched how I felt inside. The house that I had helped pay for and maintain and repair for 11 years felt different around me. The walls felt like they were made of something I had not been told the truth about. The kitchen table where we ate our dinners felt like a stage. My whole life in this house felt like something that had been happening on both sides of a line I had not been told existed. Diane came home at 10:30. She looked at me in the kitchen and said she had not expected me to still be up. I said I had been thinking. She asked what about. I said about us. She got still in that way she had, the way I now recognized as management, as preparation for whatever she thought was coming. I told her that I was not angry. That was true. I was past anger. I was in the place past anger where everything is very quiet and very clear. I told her that I knew something was going on and that I thought we needed to talk honestly, and that I was ready to do that whenever she was ready, but that I was not willing to keep living in a house where I was the only person who did not know what was happening in my own life. Diane was quiet for a long time, then she started to cry. And the crying, I want to be honest with you, landed differently than I expected, not because it moved me back. Kay toward her, but because I could see in the crying all the weeks and months of effort it had taken for her to keep herself together, and I felt something that surprised me. I felt sad for both of us. Not for me and against her. Sad for the two people who had once sat at the same kitchen table and believed in something, and somehow, one decision at a time, had arrived here. She did not deny everything. She denied some things, and I let those go because they were not the things that mattered most. What she said eventually, in the middle of a very long and very exhausting conversation that lasted until almost 2 in the morning, was that she had been unhappy for a long time, that she had felt unseen, that she had not known how to talk to me about it, that she had made choices she was not proud of, that she did not know what she wanted. I listened to all of it. I did not interrupt. I did not attack. I did not perform the grief and rage that I think she was expecting from me. What I told her when she was finally done was that I heard her, that I was sorry she had felt unseen, that I wanted to understand that honestly because her feeling unseen mattered to me and I did not dismiss it. But that I also needed her to understand that what she had done with that unhappiness had consequences that were real, and that could not be managed or reframed into something smaller than what they were. I told her that I needed some time to think. I told her I was going to sleep in the guest room. She asked me if I was going to leave. I told her I did not know yet. I want to tell you about the weeks that followed the conversation in the kitchen, because they are the weeks that shaped what came next more than any single dramatic moment did. Diane began what I can only describe as a campaign, not a cruel one, not a manipulative one in the obvious sense, more like an earnest, intense, sustained effort to make the marriage survivable again. She suggested counseling. She cut off contact with Daniel, at least on the phone I had access to. She was home earlier. She was more present at dinner. She started asking me about my day in a way that felt like she was actually listening to the answer. And I want to tell you that some of it was genuinely moving, because I am not a person who wanted to hurt Diane. I am not a person who wanted to blow up our family. I had loved this woman. I had built a life with this woman. I had stayed loyal and steady and present for 15 years. Part of me wanted the story to go the way the counseling sessions seemed designed to help it go, back together, rebuilt, healed. But another part of me, the part that had sat in the kitchen in the dark and read 9 months of messages, kept returning to something I could not explain away. It was not the betrayal itself, though the betrayal was real and deep. It was the 4 months that Marcus had known and been told to stay quiet. That was the thing I kept coming back to, not what Diane had done in her unhappiness, what she had done afterward, the decision to manage the situation rather than address it. The decision to put that weight on our 15-year-old son's shoulders. The decision to let Marcus carry the knowledge of his father's situation for 4 months while his mother decided when and whether and how to tell me. That was the thing I could not find a way around. In our counseling sessions, when I raised this, Diane said she had been scared. She said she had panicked. She said she had told Marcus not because she wanted to burden him, but because he had seen the messages and she had tried to do damage control. She said she had not thought clearly. She said she was sorry. I believed that she was sorry. I believed the fear had been real. I do not think Diane is a fundamentally evil person. But I also understood that fear does not fully explain asking a 15-year-old boy to guard his father from the truth of his own household. And I understood that the same pattern that had allowed the original situation to develop, the pattern of managing things rather than addressing them, of deciding what I could handle and what I needed to be shielded from, had not been invented for this crisis. It had been operating for a long time. This was just the moment it had shown itself fully. I also want to tell you about something that happened with Daniel during this period, because it has a bearing on what came next, and because I think it explains something important about how the situation finally resolved. About 6 weeks after the kitchen conversation, I received a message from Daniel. Not through Diane directly. He had found my work email, which is publicly listed on our company site. The message was short. It said that he thought we should talk. It said that Diane had told him things about our marriage that he thought I should know, things that explained the situation better and that he thought would help me understand. He said he had no interest in continuing NG contact with Diane and that this whole thing had been a mistake, and he thought, man to man, that I deserved to understand the full picture. I read this message once, I read it again, and then I did something that surprised even me. I wrote back. I said that I appreciated him reaching out. I said that I did not think a conversation would be useful. I said that whatever Diane had told him about our marriage, his interpretation of it was between him and his conscience, and whatever Diane and I worked out was between us. I told him clearly but without cruelty that the only thing his reaching out had done was confirm certain things for me, and that I wished him well and did not expect to hear from him again. Then I forwarded the message to Diane without comment. I wanted her to know I had received it. I wanted her to know I had handled it myself. I wanted her to know that I did not need someone to explain my own marriage to me through the perspective of the person who had helped break it. The things that happened after that in the months that followed are slower and quieter than the events I have been describing. There was no single dramatic moment where everything exploded or resolved. There was instead a long, careful process in which Diane and I tried to understand what we had been to each other and what we wanted to be going forward. I stayed in the marriage through the counseling for 4 months. I did the work. I showed up for the sessions. I answered the questions honestly. I tried to understand Diane's unhappiness and I tried to help her understand mine because I did have unhappiness of my own. I had just been too practiced at managing it quietly to have ever given it a clear name. The counselor we saw was a careful, observant woman who did not push too hard and did not let too much go unchallenged. She asked me once in a session what I needed from Diane in order to move forward. I thought about the question for a long time before I answered. I said I needed to feel like an equal in my own marriage. I said I needed to know that my emotional reality was visible to my wife and worth addressing before it reached the level of crisis. I said I needed to feel like I was a person Diane talked to when things were hard, not someone she managed the information flow toward while she figured things out. Diane heard that. I know she heard it because she cried and said she recognized it and said she was sorry. And I believed her. But believing someone's regret and knowing that what you need from them is something they are genuinely capable of providing are two different things. I learned that over those 4 months. I learned that Diane's love for me was real. I also learned that the patterns that had allowed the last year to happen were deep and old and not easily rewritten by grief and apology alone. We separated officially in the 7th month, not angrily, not dramatically. We told Marcus together, sitting at the same kitchen table, and I watched my son's face carefully, and what I saw there was not surprise. It was relief, which broke my heart in a specific way I did not expect, because I understood that Marcus had been carrying the weight of an unsustainable situation for long enough that its ending, even this ending, felt like a pressure releasing. Diane moved into an apartment 20 minutes away. We agreed on terms that were fair, that I had reviewed with my lawyer, and that I felt reflected the reality of the situation without being punitive. I am not a person who wanted to punish Diane. I wanted to be clear about what was mine and what was shared and what was owed, and then I wanted to move into whatever came next with my head up and my name clean. I kept the house, that is the practical fact of it. I had paid the majority of the mortgage for 11 years and the equity had been established accordingly, and the settlement reflected that. Diane did not fight it. I think she understood that fighting it would have required a version of the story that she did not want to tell in front of a judge. Marcus stayed with me 4 nights a week, which was what he wanted. He was old enough to have a preference and the courts respected it. He went to his mother's the other 3 nights. He adjusted the way resilient kids adjust, not without pain, but with the particular kind of dignity that comes from finally having the truth in the room instead of the managed version of it. In the months after the separation, I had to rebuild a version of daily life that was mine alone, which turned out to be both harder and more interesting than I expected. I had spent so many years organizing my life around the needs and schedules and preferences of other people that I genuinely did not know at first what I liked to do with a free evening. I did not know what I wanted to eat for dinner when no one was choosing with me. I did not know what I enjoyed watching or listening to when the choice was entirely mine. That sounds small, but it felt large, because it meant that somewhere in the long, careful years of being the steady one, the dependable one, the one who handled things and did not ask for too much, I had lost the thread back to myself. Not completely, but enough that finding it again required effort and attention that I had not known I would need to spend. I started running again. I had run in my 20s and stopped for no good reason other than that life had filled in the time. I ran in the early mornings before Marcus was up, through the neighborhood streets in the gray light, and I found that the running gave me something I had not realized I was missing. A daily proof that my body was still capable, still mine, still able to carry me somewhere new. I started having dinner with friends again, real dinner, not the kind of social event that is really just two couples performing closeness while everyone checks their phones. Old friends who had known me before the marriage and who received the news of the separation with the particular lack of surprise that told me they had been watching for some time and had not known how to mention what they saw. I want to tell you about a conversation I had with my friend Greg about 8 months after Diane and I separated. Greg had known me since college. He was the kind of person who was honest with you even when you had not asked. We were sitting in the backyard of his house on a warm evening and I was telling him about how things were going and he listened for a while and then he said, "Jack, can I say something?" I said yes. He said, "You are more yourself right now than you have been in about 10 years. And when I say that, I am not saying anything about Diane. I am saying something about you. You used to have this specific quality, this kind of sharpness, the way you looked at things and said what you thought and were interested in ideas and problems. And somewhere in the middle of your marriage you stopped. I watched it happen and I did not know how to say it because it would have sounded like I was criticizing your wife. But you got very good at managing things and you stopped being curious. You stopped being present in conversations in the way you used to be. And it is back now, you are back." I sat with that for a long time, not because it made me angry at Diane, but because it described something I recognized. I had stopped being curious. I had stopped being fully present. I had done it, I understood now, because full presence requires a willingness to feel what is actually happening, and what was actually happening had been painful for years in ways I had chosen not to fully register, because registering it would have required doing something about it. I was the one who had taught myself to be invisible, not Diane alone. I had helped. There is a thing that happened about 10 months after Diane and I separated that I want to tell you about, because it is part of this story, and because I think it is important for the point it ultimately proves. Diane called me on a Sunday afternoon. Marcus was at her apartment. I was at the house, which still sometimes felt like a house waiting for a second person to understand it was mine entirely now, but was getting more comfortable with each passing month. She said she needed to talk to me and that it was not about Marcus. I said I was listening. She told me that her consulting work had slowed down considerably and that she was struggling financially. She said the apartment was more expensive than she had planned for. She said she had taken on some credit card debt. She said she was not asking me for anything specific, but she wanted me to know where things stood. I listened to the whole thing, and then I said, as clearly and kindly as I could, that I was sorry to hear she was having a hard time. I said I hoped things would improve. I said that I had met my financial obligations from the settlement completely and on time and that I would continue to do so. I said that beyond those obligations, I was not in a position to take on additional financial responsibility for her situation, and that I trusted her to find her way forward because she was capable of doing that. She was quiet for a moment, then she said she understood, and she said something that I did not expect. She said she respected me for being clear about that. She said it was the kind of clarity she had not given me when I had deserved it and she was sorry. And then we talked for a little while about Marcus, and about his school performance, and about a scheduling question. And it was a remarkably ordinary conversation for two people who had once sat in the dark together at 2 in the morning trying to find out whether anything could be saved. I think about that conversation sometimes when I am thinking about what recovery actually looks like. Because recovery from something like this is not a dramatic moment where you win and the other person loses. It is not confrontation where you finally say everything you held back. It is not a social media post or a grand gesture or a clear-cut vindication that everyone in your life applauds. Recovery is a series of small moments in which you discover that you can be clear, that you can be kind, that you can be honest, that you can hold your own ground without needing the other person to acknowledge that you are right. That you can have a normal conversation with someone who hurt you deeply and come away from it with your self-respect intact. That, I have come to believe, is what quiet strength actually means, not the absence of feeling, not the performance of indifference. The ability to feel everything clearly and still choose the response that serves your own dignity rather than the one that is most likely to get a reaction. There is more to this story, of course. There are the months and months of small adjustments and recalibrations and discoveries that make up a life reassembled. There is the ongoing reality of co-parenting with someone you once trusted with everything and now must trust with something more specific and defined. There is the work of explaining things to Marcus in age-appropriate terms as he grows and starts to understand more of what happened than I thought he did, which is another conversation entirely and one I am still having. There is a woman I have been seeing for the last few months. Her name is not important to this story yet. She is kind and she is curious and she asks me questions and actually listens to the answers and she finds the things I find funny actually funny, which sounds like nothing and is, I have recently understood everything. I am not rushing anything. I am not performing anything. I am just paying attention in the way I learned to pay attention again. slowly, honestly, without deciding in advance what I need the outcome to be. There is also Marcus, who is 16 now and who came to me 3 months ago and sat across from me at the same kitchen table where so much of this story happened and said, "Dad, I just want you to know that I am proud of you." And I looked at my son and I thought about the 15-year-old boy who had come out of that hallway and tried to manage his father's feelings to protect something that was already broken. I thought about the weight he had carried. I thought about the relief on his face when Diane and I had sat him down and told him the marriage was ending. And I said to him, "I am proud of you too." And that was the truest sentence I have spoken in some time. I came home early on a Thursday evening and found my wife sitting alone in the dark. My son said she was fine. And the truth of what those words were covering up took weeks and months and the slow, patient work of paying real attention to finally become visible. What I found was not just the thing I feared I would find. I found also the shape of everything I had been doing wrong for years, the ways I had helped build the distance by refusing to fully inhabit my own life and my own needs and my own voice. I found the cost of being steady to the point of invisibility. I found the edge of how much quiet loyalty can hold before it becomes something that other people mistake for permission. I am not the same man who came through that front door. I am not smaller. I am not sadder. I am clearer. I know what I want and I know what I will not pretend is fine when it is not fine. I know the difference between patience and avoidance. I know the difference between being the calm one and being the silent one. I know that a man who handles everything and asks for nothing is not a man who is strong. He is a man who has convinced himself that needing things is a weakness, and he will keep paying for that belief until something large enough arrives to make him stop. Something large enough arrived, I stopped. And now the house feels like mine, and the mornings feel like mine, and the life I am rebuilding one real day at a time feels like something I am finally present for. That is what coming home early cost me, and that is what it gave me. I would not trade the second part for anything. If any part of this story felt familiar to you, I want to ask you something real. Not about Jack, about you. Have you ever been so focused on keeping things steady for everyone around you that you stopped noticing how much it was costing you to do it? Have you ever let something go quiet instead of letting it be honest? Drop a comment below. Tell me what that moment felt like for you, the moment you realized something you had been telling yourself was fine actually was not. Your story matters. And you are not alone in it.